The next Borderlands game is well into active development, and it's going to be the big one. New owners Take-Two have also been quoted in saying that they have already identified many potential growth opportunities for the series. But what does that mean? Is Borderlands 4 going to be the final Borderlands game and be supported for many years to come, or will we see a Borderlands 5 and then 6? With their goodwill down since the release of Borderlands 2, but still strong enough to hold a significant place in the gaming industry, they have a big decision to make when it comes to supporting their next Borderlands game. Do they want to lay it all on the line and release the final game in the series, or hold back and deliver the next experience when the time comes? When you think about it, Borderlands 3, despite launching 2 season passes, had that live service feel to it, and their next game is likely to take that further. Regarding the story, we're probably going to go on a journey to find Lilith, who we learn through the events of the director's cut is likely still alive. That could very well lead on to the events of the Great War, which the Watcher hinted at the end of the pre-sequel, but where do we go from there? We could very well see them round off the main plot and focus on delivering post-launch content that capitalizes on the Borderlands universe and lore through a consistent season pass cycle. No more Borderlands games, just season pass after season pass. There's certainly a good chance of that happening and could prove very lucrative for Gearbox, but what would it look like? So historically, a season pass for the Borderlands franchise includes 4 pieces of content released within a typically 8 to 10 month period. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and the pre-sequel had seasons lasting 5 months, and fits them being seen as lesser games. Although Wonderlands could have been great, it had so much potential, but the DLC was extremely poor, to put it mildly. Big ones, Borderlands 1, 2 and 3 all received 4 story DLCs, and Borderlands 4 can take the easy road and do the same. But why abandon the game after 2 years when all the content is released? Why put all your resources into creating Borderlands 5 when you've already laid the groundwork with Borderlands 4? There is a case to be made for the next Borderlands game to be an ongoing title. You pay the upfront cost once and purchase season passes as and when they release. Similar to how Destiny does it, or Hitman. Hitman used to be Hitman 1, 2 and 3, but now it's Hitman World of Assassination. The next Borderlands could be Borderlands Lands. One game, many loot. I guess there's a couple of questions surrounding that. One is how you progress the main storyline, if there's even going to be a storyline to progress. And the other is whether the game is stable enough to support multiple years of content additions. I mean, have you seen the Shift servers? I think they run on this new hardware called Cloud Potatoes. The main thing stopping the next Borderlands game from spanning half a decade or longer is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. That may sound strange to you, but it was a success for Gearbox, and there's most likely going to be a second one, and I don't see them being content with 2 of their games competing for the same player base. But that doesn't mean Borderlands 4 can't remain fully supported up until that point. Borderlands 3 was pretty much fully supported up until the release of Wonderlands. It was about a 4-month gap. It's just that Wonderlands kind of dropped the ball, and with it the players. I don't know if they expected New Tales to pick up that slack, but that didn't work. Nevertheless, Borderlands 3 was the most long-term game in the franchise, with 2 season passes, providing content from December 19th, 2019 with the Handsome Jackpot DLC, all the way through to November 18th, 2021, which was when the final Vault card Bunker Masters released. That's practically 2 years worth of premium content. What was funny about this season pass cycle was there was no word of a second season pass until well into the first year after launch. In fact, it wasn't until after the final story DLC released that it was announced. It didn't exist at first, it materialized because the game was successful. I'd say Borderlands 4 would be aiming for greater success, so plans for a second season pass will be much more solidified, and should mean more in terms of content, because let's face it, Season Pass 2 felt like my potato salad, pretty thrown together. It's possible that given their history, Borderlands 4 isn't planned as the final Borderlands game, but becomes it. If player engagement is high and community feedback is positive, the next Borderlands game might become the final game. Internally, it might become the most cost-effective solution for Gearbox to keep pumping out DLCs, launching new vault cards and other content, rather than incur the big upfront cost that a new game takes to develop. For Borderlands 4 to stand tall as the final Borderlands game that spans multiple years, seasonal content isn't going to do it on its own. You need something else to keep the players engaged during the downtime, and that's by adding live service elements. And I don't mean battle passes or always online, which you might associate with these types of games. No, none of that. Instead, how they will approach content outside of paid DLC. We only have to look at Borderlands 3 to get some ideas. There were a number of different ways Borderlands 3 injected life into the game without us having to spend a nickel. Mr. Krabs would have been proud. Some were great, others I would have done differently, but overall it worked. We had seasonal events, which included the Bloody Harvest, Valentine's Day event and Cartel event. Takedowns, a challenging end-game activity which we got both Maliwan and Guardian themed. Community events like Loot the Universe and Farming Frenzy. Level cap increases, and of course weapon buffs, which we got a lot of. Now what was interesting about seasonal events was they were limited time. The Bloody Harvest and Cartel event lasted between 4 and 6 weeks, whereas the Valentine's Day event lasted about 1 week. I guess because 1 week isn't long enough for the loneliness to take hold. I didn't like it at the time when these expired, and with it some fantastic content, but I see why they did it. Essentially they made one piece of content and released it twice, the second time coming a year later. Each time was met with an influx of players as we hunted down event exclusive gear. Smart businessness if you know what I mean. Takedowns fantastic, great, and 4 should have more. Community events did a good job at keeping the game fresh, but level caps are the real kicker here. Raising the level cap essentially means forcing the player to farm all of their gear again, if they want to have the best gear they possibly can, and most of us do. We know going into Borderlands 4 that the max level won't be the final level, but how far can they go with it? An easy way to extend the lifespan of the game is to continually raise that level cap, but there's only so far you can go before it gets impossible to balance. If Borderlands 4 is going to last, they need to do level caps differently. For it to work, they need to look closely at the Wonderlands approach of chaos levels, which is essentially a scaling concept that doesn't involve skill points, and that helps with the balancing problem. If you think about it, all level caps do is give us more skill points to play with. The level cap doesn't need to be increased, we just need enough skill points to play around with. The level could simply be a number, and maybe we can prestige or ascend our vault level for some rewards and have the game handle difficulties separately. This way it's endless, there's no point of no return balance wise, and a similar system could support the game for many years. However, whether they're willing to give up their ability to force a farming cycle on us is the barrier to this utopia. You know how games like Call of Duty or Fortnite serve a platter of buffs and nerfs to their weapons as part of ongoing updates? Well, Borderlands offers up the same opportunity, and with hundreds of legendaries, there's a lot there to play around with. However, they kind of forgot about nerfs. For a good 18 months post Mayhem 2.0, they were only buffing things. There were over 25 weeks worth of buffs in total, which each affected multiple weapons. It's not a PvP game, so I don't expect much nerfs at all. But Gearbox must have seen the player numbers rise as players hunted down these recently buffed weapons. Could this have been a tactic all along to purposely break the balance of your game so you can slowly buff weapons every few weeks to give us new things to play with? I mean, sounds far-fetched, but why didn't they buff all 200 guns at once? Interesting. No, I don't think that was the plan, but it is a valuable engagement tool that they've probably thought about. Expect Borderlands 4 to be completely unbalanced at launch? I kid, let's hope that doesn't happen. I want to throw another thing in here which I expect to see regardless if Borderlands 4 is going to be the final game or not, and that's vault cards. If you want to give your game legs without having to put in much effort at all, vault cards are the perfect thing. This one is a no-brainer. They make XP meaningful when you're capped, and fits that daily challenge vibe which games seem to have these days. Borderlands 3 had 3 vault cards released within Season Pass 2, each offering 4 new legendaries and a ton of cosmetics. But you know, in Borderlands 4 these vault cards could offer even more legendaries and even more cosmetics. There is nothing stopping them from taking this idea and running with it. So what does this all mean for Borderlands 4, and will it be the final game in the Borderlands franchise? The biggest indicator pointing to the next Borderlands game being the final one is the overarching narrative. The story has no clear direction after the Great War has been wrapped up. I mean, how do you top that? Previous games have always been heavily reliant on existing characters. Think the Vault Hunters you play as in Borderlands 1 being key to the plot of Borderlands 2. That pattern continued in Borderlands 3, but there is only so far you can take it. If they keep going down that route, things will get messy, especially with Borderlands 3's story, placing many doubts on the strength of any future main narrative. With question marks surrounding that, Borderlands 4 is well placed to end the narrative entirely, and that opens the door to many years of seasonal content and post-launch support. Gearbox knows what it takes to create games that last, and have learned how to support them in the modern age of gaming. Borderlands 2 still has a dedicated player base to this day. Imagine what it would look like today if it received yearly seasonal content updates, and you'll have an insight into the possibilities of Borderlands 4. Gearbox will not want to loosen their grip on the looter shooter section of the market by releasing a game and being done with it within 2 years, without anything to follow. If Borderlands 4 is the last one, they'll be holding on to it for dear life.